Sup, peoples? What's going on? I see some of you lamenting that I'm not social distancing at the beach, and I'll tell you, I'm actually not on the beach. So the house that I'm staying in is on the beach, and the beach is way back that way. Well, you can probably hear it. I didn't want to sit outside because I'm already burnt enough, so I decided to come inside instead of sitting outside for an hour. But can you guys hear me okay? Just want to make sure everything's working right. I'm not on my normal setup, obviously, so hopefully you all can hear me okay. But yeah, no, I'm doing as much social distancing as I can. I'm here with some family, and we're all staying in the same place here. So big house together. We have our own private beach, which is pretty cool. So not really interacting with anybody else other than family. So. But yeah, I've been out on the beach, and as you can see, I'm a little burnt. I purposefully try to stay out of the sun a little bit. But I figured, hey, I haven't done anything a little bit here, so might as well hop on. If you all are not, or if you're just joining us here, go ahead and like the video if you don't mind. That really helps YouTube decide to promote everything. Sorry, there's a fly buzzing around me, so if you see me moving around. But yeah, if you don't mind liking the video, that really helps YouTube promote these. So guys, I'll say one thing. I don't really feel like I have a voice to voice anything here other than saying that I will listen. I obviously, with everything going on in the world, I don't want to spend an entire hour talking about stuff that I'm really not the person that should be talking about it. But I'll just say this. If anybody is curious where I stand, very much Black Lives Matter, and everything that's going on right now is crazy. And so just know that I'm open to listen and support, and I don't think it's my place to give any commentary at the moment beyond that. So I'll just say that. I just feel like I have to address that or say that up front just because of what's going on. So there's that. And like I said, I think there'll probably be some more decompressing of everything that's changing and going on. And I think I just don't think I'm the right vocal piece to add any commentary other than saying that I will listen. So, but yes, on to talking Wheel of Time things, and I just figured I would hop on here because we haven't chatted in a bit, give you guys some updates, chat a little bit, and go from there. My sister, some of you have been knowing this. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and I've got a sister who's 21. She's here with us this weekend. She has been reading. She's been reading Wheel of Time. So she started Eye of the World a couple weeks back, and so I might have her, if she comes back inside now. She's at the beach right now, but if she comes back in, maybe I'll put her on the spot and interview her about her thoughts on the book so far. It's been pretty cool to see her reading it. She's ready to. I'm about to give her The Great Hunt too, so it's pretty cool to finally have a family member reading the books, and everybody's asking about them because they know I have a channel, and so I'm pretty darn pumped about that. But let me kind of pose a question for you all, and just kind of we can maybe start a conversation here. But in terms of, there's not a whole bunch of show news out there right now. I mean, there's some little things that have popped up, so I don't know that there's a ton to talk about right now about the show, unless there's something that's happened that I don't know of. But I would say, in terms of the books and new readers getting started, how many of you, I want to do kind of a very informal poll here. How many of you started reading the series within the last year or two? So let's say 2 years. How many of you are new to Wheel of Time, picked it up within the last 2 years? I'm curious to see who that would be. If there are anybody that's kind of recent, or if all of you are old Wheel of Time fans like me. So I see summer of 2018, 3 years for Tree. Okay, 5 years ago for UMK. Anybody else? I'm curious. How many of you started? Old people here. See, I'm an old timer too. I started reading a long time ago, 3 years ago. So there's definitely a fair number of you that are relatively recent Wheel of Time fans. Here's a question that I have for a lot of you. This was never an issue for me. How many of you feel like the prologue turned you off from the books, or how many of you feel like the prologue helped you get into the books? I'm very curious the answers to these questions, because just in general, it's something that I hear a lot of back and forth on, and so I'm pretty interested to see what you all say about that. 28 years. See, lots of you have been oldies with this, and I'm basically at 20 years right now. So I was at 2000. So you guys were turned off. So some of you were turned off by the prologue. Some of you turned on by the prologue. So let's hear. I would love to see some more folks there. I enjoy the prologue more on rereads. Didn't know how super turned off. So for those of you that are saying that the prologue turned you off or that wasn't interesting, what was it about it that was a turn off, or what about it wasn't interesting, or what about it did not bring you into the fold, I guess? And the reason I bring that up a little bit is I don't think a prologue, I think a lot of times when we say, well, it didn't tell me anything, right? Or it just confused me. Tell me that isn't the case with most prologues. Like, isn't that the point of the prologue, is to drop a couple little a couple little snippets for us to kind of latch onto and then figure out later. I guess I'm curious about that, because I think a lot of times prologues are meant to be confusing. Sorry, a lot of these comments are pouring in now. So the prologue kind of confused me, but I put off reading. So I hear that a lot. There's a lot of people that started reading and then put it down once they got to the prologue. I promise you I have a point in asking all this. So some people wanted to find out more. So some of you read it, wanted to hear more. Some of you didn't. So I'm just trying to read through some of the comments here with this. Some of you read Dragon Reborn first. That's odd. Hey, Jennifer. It started in 1990, first editions. Jennifer, what did you think? Jennifer Wood, what did you think of the prologue? Always curious your thoughts on that. I agree, as an English major, that might be why it didn't bother me. See, I was an English major too. I like the prologue. I really think it adds something to this. I think it adds a sense of scale to the world. It gives us a glimpse of something that we don't see again, in kind of the remnants of the Age of Legends and trying to figure that out. So my personal opinion on it was that I really liked the prologue. It's a big thing for me that I enjoyed. I really did like it. And it kind of kept me intrigued as to what the heck just happened. I kept reading because of that. But then again, I hear a lot from a lot of people the opposite of that. So I really am kind of curious as to what you all, I'd love to see some more comments on that. Red Eye of the World in 1996, loved the prologue. This is Rick Stein. I realized early on that this was a trope to set up something else later on. It made me more curious as to what was to come. And I agree with that. That's kind of how I felt about it too. Caroline R., you're right. I think it's why I picked it back up, because I'm more of a mature reader now. I remember being confused as to wanted to unravel what I was told was one of the best fantasy series ever. And so here's why I bring it up. My sister didn't mind it at all. Like, it didn't, she's not, so to be very clear, my sister is not a fantasy reader. She does not read a lot of fantasy books, has not. She typically reads a lot of, she's a college athlete, reads a lot of like self-development, working, like nonfiction type stuff. She asked me for something to read during the quarantine. I said, you should read this. She wanted something fiction, and so she read it, and she was not turned off by it in the slightest bit. In fact, she kept reading. And so I specifically asked her that question, and she was, she didn't really have much of an opinion. So I see a lot of people saying, well, I put the books down after the first couple pages, and I've just never been one to do that. So I was just curious. Now, here's where I'm going with it. And Lori very perfectly asks the question here. We talked about this a little in my last live stream, but I wonder if the TV show is going to include the prologue. And I know we talked about this a little bit before, so I don't want to spend too much time on this subject, but I want to use it as kind of a prompt to move us on a little past that. But my personal opinion is I think they need to open with the prologue. Okay, that they should open with it. And I think my rationale behind that is I think we need to set up the difference in time periods, hence the name of the series, Wheel of Time. I think it can be done in a way that it's adequately confusing, that you don't know what's going on, but yet you want to find out. That's really like what they want to do. We don't want to satiate thirst. We don't want to quench thirst. We want to give you just enough that you're still thirsty, right? And that's kind of how this all works out. And so that's kind of my opinion with it, is I think that. Now, I know we talked about on the last live stream, what do you all think? Do you think the prologue should be included, et cetera, right? Here's kind of the question that I want to kind of turn that on a little bit. What I want to see from you all is this. What are some things that actually happen in the books, right? These are things that happen in the books that are, I don't want to say major plot lines, but what are some things, and this doesn't have to be limited to the first season or two. What are some scenes? What are some plot lines? What are some characters that you think can be cut? That you think they would be a fair cut from the series, and then why? So I would love to see you tell me, hey, I think such and such a character or this plot line or any of that, what should be cut? Because I think all of us would agree to some extent that something is going to need to be cut. And so what is that for you? What do you think will need to be cut, and why do you think that that's okay? Here's kind of my rationale behind anything that's cut. It has to have very little collateral damage. Okay, so meaning when I say collateral damage, it has to not massively affect the story from there on out, because that sometimes causes more problems than it solves, right? So that's got to be a part of it, in my opinion. But it also has to make the story more simple, or it has to shorten it to a degree that it's able to fit into that. So I would like to see what some of you say, and then we can kind of talk through some of these together. That's kind of my prompt. And just to give you guys a heads up for kind of how I want to roll with this today, just because it is a little different for me. Beaches out there. I'm going to do, towards the end of the live stream, I'm going to give everybody a big update on website stuff. This week I've been able to make a lot of progress on some of the back end stuff for the website. And so we'll be doing, probably by the end of this month, we're going to be moving towards a live beta, meaning that it will be accessible. We'll begin to use it. We'll begin to post content. We've got a lot of the creator pages done. So we'll talk about that a little later, but I'll just want to kind of plant that seed. But for right now, while you guys are answering these questions so I can run through them, what are the things that you think can and should be cut, and why? So I want to hit on some of you have been posting these while I was talking there, so I want to try to hit on a lot of them. And I'm so sorry if I miss you guys. If you don't mind, real quick, like the video if you're kind of just joining us here. It really helps YouTube promote these live streams. So, but let's hit on who some of you think should be cut. Okay, so spoilers. And by the way, guys, the stream is mostly spoilers. So if you're brand new to the channel or brand new to the live stream, or you're just getting here, this is mostly going to be spoiler talk. So if you have not finished the books, or if you're somebody that cares about spoilers, I'd probably put your earmuffs on the rest of the time. So spoilers for Lord of Chaos, but kill off the Shido after Dumai's Wells and don't bring them up again. Yeah, I think there's an argument that can be made for that. The question then becomes, if you cut the Shido out, it cuts a lot of different plot lines, which may or may not be necessary down the road. Like, for instance, the Perrin and Fael plot line is the major part of it, right? But what ends up coming from that is Perrin joining forces with, for instance, the Shan-Chan. That humanizes the Shan-Chan, right? So, Like, is that necessary? Do we cut all of those different storylines? And if that's the case, is Perrin just going south to get the prophet, and then what? Right? Like, what happens after that? And so that's an example to me of a plot line where I think you have a villain that does drag out, and I would agree it drags, but it really only feels like it drags because they cut that entire plot line. This is what I've always had to say about the Fael like capture plot line. It's actually not that much page time. If you really pull it apart and look at it, there's not a ton of page time put towards Perrin's search for Fael. The thing that's annoying about it to us is the fact that it spans 4 books. So it's not a lot of, like, if that plot line got as much book time as, for instance, Perrin's plot line in, I just pulled my plug out. But if that got as much page time as Perrin's plot line in The Two Rivers did in Shadow Rising, I mean, it was a good third of the book, right? If it had gotten that much, it would have been probably completed in a book or 2. And so I think some of the things that we feel like drag throughout the series can be kind of condensed into one season, and it won't feel as awful, if that makes any sense. So that would be my small opinion on that. So let's see here. And by the way, I need to plug my computer back in. So hold on one second. Okay, I'm back. So cutting Loyal. See, I thought cutting Loyal would be something that could be done, and I didn't want it done. But we know that Loyal's in the show because they've cast him. So I think that one's kind of gone. Yeah, some plot lines are, I love this. Jack says this. So I think some people don't make a distinction between what's good and what's unnecessary. Some plot lines are bad, but they're essential to the plot. And the show can just do those better instead of cutting them. And that is 100% something that I agree with. I think there are a lot of plots that are not necessarily fun to read, but are very essential to the plot. For instance, Elaine taking the throne. I think most people would argue that's a fairly boring plot line, although it does have some moments, right? I think part of the reason, and again, I'm going to attribute that, I feel like a lot of the reason for that feeling rough is the fact that it takes a couple books to get it done, right? So if it takes a couple books to get it done, if they can condense that into a season or 2 seasons of different plot, I feel like it's going to be a lot less rough. Okay. So Valen Luca. Ooh, that's a good one. So cut Valen Luca. So, okay. What are the reasons to cut Valen Luca? So let me ask you this. What would we, if we took him out of the show, right? Because he's there, him and the circus, if you will, are in the show twice. What does it add to the show to remove that, right? Like, if we take him out, is what goes in its place? Do we have just the girls? I think the first time he's in there, I think it's much easier to cut him, right? Like, I think you could have Elaine and Tom and Julian and Nynaeve traveling on their own, right? Without anybody. You could do that. Like, is it necessary to have him there? No. I think Valen Luca becomes much more necessary when you get to the Matt escaping Ebudar plotline, right? Like, when you get there, that's when you have to have something for them to hide and escape, and that makes a lot of sense for that to happen. And so you could cut him originally, but I don't know how much time it saves just because it's them traveling anyway. So that's an example of where I do think they could cut the first round of the circus, but maybe not the second round. Just a thought. Okay, so Ray Jordan, combine Gawain and Galad with a much higher emphasis on the Galad portion. Okay, so I wholeheartedly disagree with that one. I think that's a common, I know Daniel Green supports that one. Not something I can get behind. And here's why. As much as I hate Gawain as a character, I would rather see them do a better job with Gawain. They have two very different plot lines and two very different arcs. I think Galad has a great arc, and he's representative of the White Cloaks in general. And I think the White Cloaks as a villain have a great arc. So, in terms of cutting him, I really think we need to keep Galad's plot line intact. We need to keep the arc that he has as character development and growth. I think we need to keep that intact. And I think it would be very difficult to combine what Gawain does, right, because you couldn't have him join the White Cloaks. And so I just think they need to do a better job with Gawain. My opinion is that Gawain should have left with the group when Swan escapes the tower with Min. I think that would have been a good time for him to leave the tower to go find Elaine. I would like to see that reunion. So I think that's a major departure that they could do, in my opinion, but I would not cut them. That's my opinion, though. So they could cut the battle at Tarwin's Gap. They could just have the Battle of Falme at the end of season 1. I think that's where the season will end. We only really need one battle, one big battle, one Balsamon fight. And Dana, I actually agree with that. I think that is something that could be done. The Battle of Falme, I think the end of the Eye of the World from a narrative standpoint is better in retrospect. Like if you've read the series and then you go back and read Eye of the World, it gets better. As a first-time viewer reader, it's a bit confusing and it's a bit anticlimactic in the sense that the two villains that show up, we get Agenor kills himself, and you have Balthamel get smashed by Green Man, and then Rand somehow beats Balsamon even though he doesn't know what he's doing, right? And in a dream shark. I think you can spread out that development. So I think that is actually a great cut that could be made. I think that's a great combination of things, and then you don't have this feeling like, hey, every book or every season he's defeating Shamael again and again and again and again. So I think they can get to the Eye of the World. I think they can find the horn. They can escape. They can bring it back. I do not think that the battle and then Rand channeling and killing Forsake, I don't think that has to be the end of that first season. So, but okay. So I'm curious on anybody else. Now I see some of you saying Hopper, and I'm just, nope. Hopper is important. I hope that's a joke. We're not cutting Hopper. How dare you? How dare you? So, any case, let me hear. So, let's be nerdy. Oliver, I say cut Oliver. I know you wanted him to play. I know you wanted to play him. No, I don't want to play Oliver. That's Daniel Green. He's going to be playing Oliver. But I think the role is expendable. I would agree. But again, if I come back to expendable doesn't necessarily mean cuttable. Okay, so it also has to save something. And so what does Oliver add, or what does he take away? And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. Does he fit into a category where he doesn't necessarily affect the plot much? And then does he have an arc? Does he have something that has a narrative purpose? If he doesn't have a narrative purpose, then he can be cut. I think Oliver adds some responsibility to Matt that he doesn't get elsewhere. I think Oliver could be a comic relief type thing. I'm just trying to think of the reasons to keep Oliver. Obviously, he ends up blowing the horn of Valir. That's kind of a out of left field thing. And he represents. What are the arguments? Tell me the arguments for cutting Oliver. Like, other than he's expendable. Like, why? What? Because I do think the one narrative device that he plays a part in, and I think I see MK mentioning this here. The one thing that Oliver does add is he introduces the game of Snakes and Foxes. and he's the one that plays it, right? And he's the one that adds the whole that plot line, or that he puts that in the discussion. So he puts Chekhov's gun on the table, right? Like that's really what that is, and it becomes much more important that he's laid the seeds. Now they would have to do that elsewhere. Could it be done elsewhere, right? Like, but I think that's actually a decent. I don't think he saves much by cutting him. That's my point. Like he certainly is expendable, and I think you could certainly attribute what he does to other characters. But at the same token, he doesn't really, cutting him from the story doesn't really add back to the story or make it more simple or save much time. And so that's kind of my thinking on that as I'm kind of thinking it out loud. Wheel Talk, we are not spoiler free. So if you are brand new to the live stream, this is obviously not a super big, we are not spoiler free here. We are talking spoilers. So if you care about spoilers, probably watch out. If you don't mind liking the video, guys, that again, it really helps YouTube promote the live streams for whatever reason. They don't show up on people's screens unless people are liking them. So if you don't mind interacting and whatnot, I appreciate you for doing that. But so who else? That's kind of my thinking on this. And guys, part of the reason I'm asking you all is I am going to be putting together a video on cuts I think can be made. And I want to hear from some of you all on what your thoughts are on that, why you think certain characters can be cut or plot lines. And I see us talking a lot about characters. Are there any plot lines that you think could kind of go away? Eludra and the Illuminators, huh? Now that is an interesting. So cutting, I love the fact that we introduce gunpowder though towards the end though. So without Eludra, we don't get that. So again, it kind of comes back to me to this whole idea that that if you cut certain characters, right? Like if you cut characters that are not, they may not have a huge impact on the plot, but they play a certain role. If you cut those characters, does it add enough back to the show, right, to have them out? And I think Eludra is an example of somebody that could be cut, but I don't think it makes sense to do it. Mike's book reviews had it. The Andoran succession should be so much quicker. And I agree with that. I really think it can be quicker. That's the one plot line that I think is a little different than the Fael, Perrin. That's actually not that long. It's just long because it spans a lot of books. The one that I think can be done a lot shorter is the succession. I think that could be done a lot quicker. So far, I wouldn't cut anything. Yeah. So, Lori, I actually do have a couple that I'm purposefully not giving my opinion here. There are things I think should be cut, and I think can be cut. The difference is I want to hear you all's opinions on them and kind of walk you through my thinking on what they should and shouldn't cut and why it makes sense to cut them. So, Sea Folk, almost everything involved with the Sea Folk can be cut. They're basically irrelevant to the story, and I mostly skim their parts on a reread. So, okay, I wasn't going to spout my opinion, but I actually do think the Sea Folk can be cut. Do I like the idea of having another group of people or a group of channelers, right? Like, I love that idea, but cutting them, like they don't really serve a major narrative purpose. They don't have much of an arc. They serve to be annoying to a lot of our main characters a lot, like in different plot lines, but on the whole, their only major contribution is the Bowl of the Winds, which could be done with Aes Sedai. It could be, so I think that the Sea Folk very much could be cut. Just a thought. So the kin are much less necessary than we realize. So yeah, the kin are another group of channelers. Now, the only issue I have with cutting the kin is they introduce a couple different elements of, I think there's a couple big cool parts that maybe could be taken on by other channeling groups like the Aiel or something, but how old they are, the fact that they don't have the 3 oaths. I think there's some interesting there are some interesting dynamics there. I think watching so guys, I'm just thinking what makes good TV, right? Watching the scene where Elaine and Nynaeve basically get manhandled by the kin in Abu Dar, and how frustrating it is that they don't believe that they're sisters, right? Like all that. I actually think that is going to be a pretty compelling scene. And I think having the farm with the kin, like, I think that can be interesting as long as we don't dwell on it. Like that does advance the plot. And the kin could be, as Dana just pointed out, the kin could be used as, hey, they have some extra knowledge of weather or something like that. So yeah, I hesitate, and I think I see somebody just mention this. You don't want to cut too much of the peoples or things like that because it makes the world smaller, and that's one of the things that's an advantage, is how large the world is. The problem is you just can't introduce too many different characters or too many different groups for people to follow on television. So, Jordan did not have any unimportant concepts. Things people recommend cutting or. Yeah, I would say there are some things though that Jordan had that were not necessarily big concepts. So we'll hit on that in a second. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate the donation, man. So you just earned my major respect. CFO equal irrelevant. So, in an ideal world, would I cut anything? Like I would love to see it just as a book reader, right? Like I would be happy to see everything make it into the show. But things are going to need to be cut, right? And so I absolutely think that the Sea Folk are an example of something that can be cut. Isn't going to hurt much. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. So I see a couple of you saying you can cut Gawain, only half joking. Yeah, I think Gawain's an example of somebody that I would not cut, but that I would do better. I just think that Gawain can be done better. So I want to come back to this, Ubelk, if I'm saying that right. Jordan did not have any unimportant concepts. All the things people recommend cut. Removing cuts valuable realism and context that make the story make sense. So you're right. What we have to avoid are cutting out things that pull the context or pull the richness of the world out. But on the flip side of that, there are things and elements and concepts that are introduced that just don't go anywhere. So I certainly think that there are things that can be cut. Let's just put it that way. I think there absolutely are things that can be cut. Oh, hey there, Mr. Unraveling the Pattern. So if you guys are not aware, Unraveling the Pattern has a YouTube channel. He's popped into the chat there. And there's a couple content creators in here, so I don't mean to single him out, but he and I are working on some projects for you guys that I think I'm excited to get back home to be able to work on it, but I think you guys are going to be pretty excited. I know we had a little meeting the other day while I was on vacation, and I'll just say I'm pretty darn excited to get some of this stuff out to you guys. It's going to be really cool. I don't think anything exists like it in the Wheel of Time fandom, and so I'm pretty pumped about it. I'm pretty pumped to get this stuff out to you guys. And so if you are not a subscriber to Unraveling the Pattern, you should do that. We are going to, obviously, most of the creators here, we've got a bunch of different creators here in the chat. I see Wheel Talk, I see Lesbian Nerdy, I see, I think I saw some others, but those are the ones popping into my head right now. But we're going to be having the creator pages on the website, which we'll talk about here towards the end. And I'm really excited to be able to share, guys, as some growing content creators out there, see some of their stuff, and hopefully these pages are going to help with that. So okay, so let's hit back to the questions, and again, if you're just joining us, here was the question that was kind of posed. What are some things that you think can be cut from the show, or whether it's a character, whether it's a set of characters, whether it's a plot line that could be cut and removed from the show, but would not necessarily have a lot of collateral damage, wouldn't change the plot, but also by removing them, it adds something back. So that's kind of the question that we're kind of walking through here. And so for those of you that are just joining us, that's what we're talking about. And so definitely looking for some of your comments. So we've been kind of going through a lot of these here. Okay, so I see Chansonnet, Morghese, and Talavor. Now, let me specify here. Are you saying the character of Morghese and the character of Talavor can be cut? Or are you saying cut their little lovey-doveyness that happens? Interesting. So I'll wait for you to respond to that, but we'll move on to some other stuff before getting into that. The romance, you think it's cringy. So is it an example? And I guess let me pose this to you because you could argue that a lot of the romances in the Wheel of Time are cringy. Is it an example of where it could just be done better with better writing or better acting or whatever? Or is it something that just needs to be cut altogether, like it doesn't add to the story? I would argue the only cool thing about Morghese, so like I think, let's talk about Morghese in that plot line for a moment. I think there's an argument to be made that Morghese could be cut. Basically, she could be killed by Ravi and Rand could be framed for it, right? Like I think that would settle a lot of plot lines. And I think there's a very valid point that could be made that would happen. The one thing that I like that I think is a cool narrative decision in television shows is when the audience knows a character is somebody else, okay, but the characters in the show don't. So for instance, I'll give you a good example of this, right? That was really compelling. I think one of people's favorite plot lines or scenes in Game of Thrones was in season 2. And sorry for spoilers here, but you've got Tywin Lannister and you've got Arya Stark, right? You've got them together. Tywin doesn't know that's Arya. We as the viewers do. And it's a very compelling, like obviously their dialogue was great, but kind of having two characters that are supposed to be enemies kind of getting along was a great, great scene. By cutting out Morghese, you kind of lose that plot line with Perrin, where he doesn't understand that he has the Queen of Andor serving his wife tea, right? Like that's going on. And so now, is that going to happen elsewhere? Yeah, that's going to happen with the Shiva. That's going to happen with Halima. That's going to happen with the Black Aja. So maybe that trope, or maybe that maybe it'll be overused. I'm just saying because I do think Morghese could be cut. I think she could be cut. Basically, I think she could be actually killed by Ravine, but Rand was framed for it, and I think that would be much more compelling to moving the plot forward and actually making Gawain's reactions seem real if he truly does think that Rand killed her. And there's some type of evidence to show that happened, right? So just a thought, because that's one of the things that kind of turns in my head. I see a lot of you talking about how bad that is. So the trial was lame. Agreed. I really don't like that as kind of the turning point. I think that could have been done better. So, okay, kind of hitting on some of these. Combining the Forsaken, merging Missana and Grendel, for example, it lessens the number of villains while amplifying the film. Okay, I've been on the record about this one before. I am absolutely not in favor of cutting a single one of the Forsaken. In fact, I think all of them should have expanded roles. Your conflict or your show is only as good as your villains. Okay, the Forsaken have the ability to be outstanding villains. We lose a lot of them early on, and so I don't feel like that they ever, like the number of them ever gets too much to follow. Like I don't think that's ever a reason that the plot drags. So it isn't going to take much to flesh out who and what they are, and they sort of play a villain. Like there's usually two or three. Sorry, there's a fly. There's usually two or three of them that are featured at once. Like we're never having to follow 7 of them or 8 of them going on at once. So is there enough screen time? Yeah, because we're still, guys, at worst, this is going to be a 7 or 8 season show. So you've got 8 seasons of villains. Think about all the villains that showed up in Game of Thrones, right? There's tons of them. It's not going to be an issue. In fact, they are compelling. They have different motivations and different rationales. Some of them will be obviously fleshed out more than others. Absolutely, they will be. But I don't think cutting them accomplishes that, because then you're actually squishing plot lines together. And yeah, like a Demon Dread, for instance, is a good example of somebody whose plot line could be expanded. I would love to see more of Cimarog actually being straight up evil. So I would be in favor of not cutting a single one. In fact, I would be expanding their characters. That's what I would be doing. I just think that's a better way to do it. Frendal is essentially the Hannibal Lecter of the Forsaken. Interesting thought. I really think Cimarog can be. I mean, they all play different roles. Like, you've got Lanfear, who is flat out crazy, but at the same time sometimes comes across as very sane and smart, and the possibility that she might turn on the Dark One, right? Like that she has her own point of view. You've got a Shamael who has completely different motivations than the rest of them. You've got Cimarog, who is sadistic, like straight up sadistic. Samael and Demon Dread kind of have a similar motivation, if you will. Like they're both jealous, right? So I think that there can be some distinction made there. But you've got Asmodean, who is a turncoat, and I hope they play that up a little bit. I think that's a very cool story that I wish we got to see a little bit more of before it was cut short. So yeah, I think there's some compelling villains there. I really love the Halima. I think Halima is going to be really awesome to see, just because you do have that evil person there, and it's going to cause tension the whole time, knowing that Halima is a Forsaken hanging around Egwene. I think they can be done really well. And I would agree. I see some of you saying that they're not all great villains, and they could be executed better. Absolutely. But that's why I say expand them. So how do you introduce all the Forsaken in the first season? You don't introduce them all. I mean, Robert Jordan didn't introduce them all. We only really need to introduce one, frankly, one or two. I don't think that has to happen. I think you can do it very slowly. Now, Halima is way more compelling than Dashiva. The way it was written, absolutely true. Can Dashiva be more compelling? Yes. We can give Dashiva some more impact. We just have to give them more impactful actions. It's the same thing with Padan Fain. One big thing for me is I've said this a bunch of times, and people get upset when I say it, but hey, it is what it is. I want to see Padan Fain straight up kill and murder a lot of people in the Two Rivers. I want to see Bran al'Vere killed by Padan Fain. It makes his character more impactful. We care about Bran al'Vere. He's related to one of our characters, more so than just a family that Perrin has that we don't ever see on screen. And I think I think they are setting up Perrin's family to be people that we end up seeing and killing. I mean, imagine if, and I'm not advocating for this, but imagine if in A Shadow Rising we showed up and Padan Fain had killed Tam al'Thor in front of the whole village. Well, we had some time with Tam al'Thor, right? Like we were invested in him as a character. And so him dying, Rand's father dying, would have been extremely impactful. Now, again, I'm not suggesting, Tam had a narrative place still in the story, but understanding that type of impact does impact us as readers. So that's kind of my thought process there. So, and the fact I see somebody saying, no, we love Bran. That's exactly the reason why Bran can be killed off. But see, I think having Padan Fain at the end is important. I just think they needed to expand what he did at the end. He's such a third threat, and he's counter to the Dark One. Like I think there's something really cool there. Hey, Stubble McShave, thank you very much, man. Stubble always has the best questions, and he's extremely thoughtful. But he says there. So first of all, thank you for the donation, man. There need to be 3 times as many point of views of the Forsaken. 100% agree. 100% agree. I want to see more point of views. I want to see more of them. I want to see them involved more. I just think it's impactful. Now, yeah, I see Ray talking about this one, my other big idea that everybody seems to hate on me for. I think having Semirog cause Rand to kill men is a big, big deal. Hey, guys. Sorry, family's walking up.
You're going to get people coming for lunch in a second.
Yeah, I figure we'll be done in a minute anyway. So, but yeah, I really think that Semirog causing Rand to kill men, right, cuts men from the rest of the story, obviously, but she doesn't really play much of a role there at that point. But what that happens is it's just extremely impactful. It's not something I want to see, but it's because I don't want to see that I think it would be good. Okay, so I think those are some different things that can happen that I think would be really, really compelling. So, guys, I'm going to take this time here because I do have to run. We're going to be eating lunch here as a family soon, but what I'm going to be doing here, I want to talk very quickly about some of the updates on the website and some of the stuff I'm excited for. So, I'm going to go out and put this out there. I think by the end of this month, we're going to be able to do. We're going to do call it a soft launch or a beta launch of the website. And so by the end of June, the website should be live. We'll have all the creator pages for the most part done. We're going to have we'll be able to post stuff in the blog format. And so that'll be out there. And then we've got parts of the wiki that are done and coming together. A lot of the back end work. Creating a wiki, guys, is a heck of a lot of work. It's not just making web pages. It's making web pages that interact and search functions and all kinds of stuff. And so just wanted to give you guys that heads up that this is on the horizon, and I'm pretty excited about it. So that is coming up. If you are still, and I know a lot of you have volunteered to do this, but if you guys want to help write wiki articles, that's the big thing that we could use help with right now. Join the Discord server. It's in the link at the bottom of the video, the description. You can join the Discord server and just ask to be put into the website help group. What we really need is just people that are willing to write articles. And so if you're able to help with that, that would be awesome. If you want to support, if you don't want to help that way, but you want to support us financially, the best way to do that is in Patreon right now. So if you want to help, the Patreon link is in the description below as well. And so you can kind of support us there with what we're doing. But again, if you're unaware of what we're making a big community website that's going to link a lot of different content creators, that's going to be linking people's content. We're having a brand new wiki that should be spoiler free. That'll help folks get started with that. So a lot of stuff I'm super excited to get out to you all. If you're in the Discord server, you've seen little glimpses of it here and there as we drop stuff, the maps. I'm super excited for some videos we've got in the works in the background. So a lot of fun, exciting stuff is happening. And I want to thank all of you guys for being a part of it and everything. It's been a fun ride, and I'm excited for a lot of the stuff going future here with the channel. Jennifer Wood, thank you so much, as always. Jennifer's like the best. She said, thanks for the chat. Looking forward to the website. I am too. I appreciate you. If you guys are not, if you are a content creator, by the way, and you are not on the website, I'm looking at you, We'll Talk. Make sure that you get, well, you might be actually, never mind. But if you aren't and you're a content creator, make sure you ask for the application so we can get you on there. So, hey, everybody, I got to run off and get some lunch, but you all, thanks for joining us today. Sorry, I wanted to do a little shorter live stream, and we'll be back with some videos here next week when I'm back at home. Thank you guys. Take care.